off again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. And it feels alright when they come and say to you.
Welcome along to a special edition of NUFC Matters, and I'm joined by a good pal of mine, Alan, who we've met many times. I've done a few talk-ins for him, but I've got to be honest, I never expected to be interviewing him on my podcast. I didn't think the tables would ever be turned, Alan, me coming to you and doing something with you, but here we are.
Exactly. It's very strange indeed.
But
it's
a feel-good factor story. And the reason I've got you on is because this book is coming out, The Adventures of Bob the Pigeon and Mr. Todd, written and illustrated by Tony Race, based on a true story by Alan Todd. How have we come to this? Some of you will remember the story about a pigeon flying off course. Well, Alan is the owner of said pigeon, and he's here to tell his story and to promote the book. So I didn't want to bring you onto one of the podcasts because this is worth a podcast on its own. And we talked about getting you on a while ago, and I'm glad we didn't now, because ultimately it's proved to be every bit of success that I thought it might be. And here we are with a book to sell. So this is a good time to get you on. So Alan, tell us first of all how you got into pigeon racing, and keep me right, because I've heard it called pigeon fancying. I've called it pigeon racing. Tell us your interest in pigeons and how it came about.
Well, thanks again for inviting us on, Steve. It's a real pleasure. Obviously, I've been pigeons all my life. Really, my dad had them. My dad was actually playing for Norwich in the mid-50s, and when he went in the army and that, and when his dad died, he came home to help look after the pigeons, believe it or not. Gave his chance of being a proper footballer. And so he's had football. I was born in 62, and my dad had the pigeons then. And unfortunately, my dad's dead now. I found him dead in the pigeon loft, believe it or not. And he died. So I've been involved with pigeons all my life, but really flying them since 1998. But when my dad died in 2008, I've been on my own for 15 years now.
And I mean, it's not a regional thing, is it? Because, I've seen pigeons up and down the country racing. Is it something that's gone on in this country for years? What's the history behind it?
Well, years ago, it was a massive sport, and it was basically brought into it by the miners. So I think the miners got sick of being underground, and they were looking for something to have a sort of pastime, and I think the pigeons give them the fresh air. This is just what I've been told by old pigeon men from years ago, that it was in the end days, it was massive. Now it's not so big. It's, people are, unfortunately, the youngsters aren't coming into sport. That's where I'm hoping the book helps to get the publicity side of the book, of the sport going, to encourage the youngsters to come into the sport, because I'm probably one of the youngest. There's not many younger than me in my club. They're all 70 and 80-year-old, and it's who's going to replace them people? So the sport could die off unless we get a new influx of fanciers to join up and replace, unfortunately, the people that do pass away. Because it's such a brilliant sport. It is very time-consuming, but the pleasure it gives you is unbelievable. It is. You're sitting waiting for a pigeon racing from France, and it flies 400 odd mile back to you. You cannot replace that feeling, really. So it's a fabulous sport.
Where did the term fanciers come from?
Good question. I'm classed as a pigeon fancier because I like pigeons. That's basically where I would think it would come from. That's as much as I really know. A pigeon fancier is someone like myself who because they call the fancy press. So they do call it the pigeon fancy. So that's probably linked up to it as well.
Yeah, I googled it actually, but just there as you were speaking, it's the fancying is the art and science of breeding domestic pigeons. People who breed pigeons are commonly referred to as pigeon fanciers.
That's what it is.
I mean, I presume as well. I mean, is there set numbers that you're allowed to have for starters?
Not really. It's basically down to your money, how much you're prepared to spend, and your time you've got. It's unlimited the amount of money you can have, but obviously in today's climate, with everything being so expensive, a lot of people are looking at, maybe he's cutting the numbers down, maybe he's not breeding as many this year. Obviously racing the pigeons with the cost of the diesel and training pigeons, it's not a cheap sport anymore. Years ago, I reckon in the war, they used to come and get your best pigeons off you and give you some corn to feed the rest of your pigeons. That was what they gave you years ago in the World War, when they used to take them away to France to send the messages back from the front. It's First World War, they used to do it as well. The top pigeons in the country used to go to war.
Yeah, amazing. Again, you got to forgive me because it's not my bag. But how do they know where to come back to? Is it as simple as they come back to where they're fed? I mean, there's a couple of pigeon crees, I think they're called, down next to me, and quite often if I'm out and about and walking past, the guys are there and they've just let them out and they go off, and you would imagine that a bird would just, once it's out, it doesn't want to be in captivity, it's off and it's away. But is it the sense that you rear them, they don't know anything else and they just come back but where they're fed? Well,
it's like, we're just starting to now come into the breeding season now. A lot of people have got young birds now, but I don't. My first young birds will probably chip out tomorrow. So tomorrow or Friday, I'll get my first youngsters. And it's like, basically, it's like a child takes a while to walk, a pigeon takes a while to fly. It's this very similar thing, because a pigeon will get big very quickly. Within probably 6 weeks, they're a decent size. And a lot of people will not tell the difference between a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, a 6 or 7 week pigeon and a pigeon that's maybe 2-year-old. They just fill out when they get a bit older, that's all. But what you start doing, you start letting them out, and then eventually some of them will start flying off, and they'll come back to the loft, and eventually they'll fly for 20 minutes and they'll fly for 30 minutes. They just get stronger naturally. And then once they're about 3 months old, you might start training them as you put them in the car, take them down the road and get them used to coming back to your loft. So you'll start off by, say, going 5 mile, then 10 mile and 20 mile and 30 mile. And once they start racing, the youngsters start racing at 90 mile and they get further and further and further down the country. It's just it's a time thing. You just learn them. You just hope that once they've got enough strength in their wings and they're flying maybe an hour around your loft, then they'll be ready to train then. And then obviously once they're training, you race them as youngsters, and then they're your next days, your yearlings next year. And hopefully, like I've got some pigeons in the race team, they're 5 and 6 year old. They're just, hopefully the good ones will stay around. You do lose some. Some get killed by birds of prey. That's the major problem, and that's a major problem in the sport, bird of prey. That's got a lot of people packed in over the last few years, because sparrowhawks and that are really, really severe on the pigeon sport, sorry.
So explain to me how you race pigeons. What is define what a race is? I mean, a race for a human being is from one end of a running track to another. How do you race pigeons? What's the rules?
Well, basically, there's no rules apart from, obviously, I fly where I've got my pigeons. My friends or maybe is a mile away from me. So when you go to a race, you've got a measurement. So say you start the race, young birds this year, you'll start at, say, 90 mile to me, but it might be 91 mile to the lads up the road. So what they do is, when they're let out of let's say they're let out at 8 o'clock in the morning, they'll work out the distance between where they're let off to where they come home, and they work an average speed out. So a man up the road who's a mile further than me, he'll get more time to clock his pigeon in than what I've got, because he's flying further than me. And that's the same wherever you go, whether you go to 200 miles, 300 miles, 400 miles. Everybody has a distance. And then obviously it's not so much a handicap, but basically it's where your loft is. So your loft is, say there's 16 lofts in my club. Every one of them have got a distance. So when you come to send your pigeons away on a Friday night, you all set your clocks. And on a Saturday, when the pigeons is home, you go to the local club, you put your clock in, and it reads your time off. and it'll read off with your time and your distance, and it works out the speed of your pigeon, and all the rest of the lads will get the speed of their pigeons as well. And then the one who's got the fastest speed on the day wins the race.
Wow, God, that's so complex. I mean, is it competitive? Is it really competitive?
Aye. Very competitive. Very. You're talking in my club. I'm fortunate we're in one of the strongest clubs in the area and one of the biggest clubs. You're talking in a race on a Saturday, you could have 500, 600, 700 pigeons in your club, and then you've got your other area, so you could be flying against 1,000 pigeons on a Saturday just round here. And they all want to win. You're all trying to win. And then when you go to the bigger races, when you're flying against people from like West Auckland and Hexham and Newcastle and Darlington, you're talking about 4,500, 5,000 pigeons in one race.
And is there like leagues and stuff like that? Is that how it's, is that actually league?
You have a point system in your club. So if you win the club, you'll get 7 points. If you're second, you'll get 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, so on. And same in your federation, when you fly against other clubs, the winner will get 6 and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's like a point system. At the end of the year, whoever's got the most points is the top one.
Amazing. It's it just shows you, it opens your eyes when you start talking about a particular subject, how little you really know about it. So I mean, what's the lifespan of the pigeon?
Basically, I've got a couple of pigeons in my stock loft now. They're 10 and 11-year-old. I had a one not long ago. He lived till he was 16-year-old. But I know a lad who's got a pigeon 20-year-old, but they're very, very few and far between. You can go in and you just find a one, like a human. You could find one that just dies 2 or 3-year-old. You just don't know. But majority of them, I've got two there worth what he's 2011, so he's 12-year-old. I've got another one 10-year-old. They've got a race expectancy of probably up to about 5 or 6-year-old. Then after that, you give the good ones, you put the stock loft, and the other ones you'll maybe give to lads starting up, or someone who's maybe you try and help them with some decent pigeons. That's what you try and do. The pigeon men are usually pretty well supportive of other pigeon people. They tend to help people out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fascinating. It really is an unknown world. So obviously the story that everybody now knows is about one particular pigeon. And it was a fascinating story, which didn't just grab, local attention, but it grabbed the world's media. And tell us what happened. Tell us the circumstances.
Well, he went away to a race. We usually fly from France, but because of Brexit, we weren't allowed to fly our pigeons from France. So we had to look for another distance. So people like to fly a certain distance. So I ended up going to Guernsey, which is 380 miles for me, back to Gateshead from Guernsey. And what happens is you get them to go away on the wagon. Say on the Thursday night, they'll go away on the wagon. You'll get to the Guernsey on the Friday, they'll get fed and watered. And on the Saturday, they get liberated. And the theory is they race back to the loft. So they come back to your loft. But obviously, Bob had other ideas that day. And he ended up 4,000 miles away. And obviously, you've got your theories on what happened. Nobody will ever know because he can't tell you. But I think personally what happened is he's probably coming home and maybe had a thunderstorm or something on the English Channel. And he's been washed down. And he's ended up on a ship gone the other way. So when he's pulled himself around, he's been in the middle of the sea. And pigeons don't like crossing the sea if they can't see land. So with him not being able to have any sea, he's stayed on the ship till it's docked. And my theory again is, we talked about this when we're actually in America, because we ended up going to New Orleans. We flew to New Orleans airport and had a couple of days in New Orleans. Now I thought he went to Gulf of Mexico with it being an oil tanker. Some people thought he might have went on a cruise ship, but the condition he was in, if you look at a couple of the photographs that you showed earlier, how dirty he was. Now, even there, them people there done a marvellous job, because when I picked him up, he had no body on him. He was dirty. His beak was dirty, and he was covered in lice. We look at the state of him there. If you look at the photographs on TV and that now and see what condition he's in, you wouldn't believe that's the same pigeon, because he's absolutely immaculate now. He's like an oil painting now. He's back to his normal self. So he must be a very, very strong pigeon. He's had 2 weeks of basically dossing it. You know, he's been stuck on a boat. Has he had anybody feeding him? Has he had to fend for himself? But you just don't know. And when that man who found him, the old preacher man, which is here, if people want to go online, they can see it. When we went to meet him, he was absolutely over the moon. These are the people that 40 is seeing there. That's actually Monroeville County Animal Shelter, who were just absolutely ecstatic, because when you hear the middle of nowhere, this is the middle of nowhere. Because originally when we were going to go, we were going to stay 2 nights in New Orleans, sorry, 4 days down in Monroeville. But Val, who done all the really hard graft of like setting up the quarantines and tests and things like that, she said to me, Alan, you couldn't go down there. She says, there's nothing in Monroeville. She says, well, by the time we get through the flight and that and pull ourselves around, we'll have a couple of days in New Orleans and then go down to pick the pigeon up on the 3rd day, and we'll come back to the airport on the 4th day. And when we went to Monroeville, they were absolutely ecstatic. There were a couple of tears in their eyes. They were just so emotional that they were, because nothing like that happens in this part of the world. As I say, if you look at that photo again where she's holding him, he was absolutely, you know, wouldn't surprise me if you look at that. If he died in her hands, he was that weak and that far down. To bring him round the way they did just shows how much these people care for like animals, and they do it all with donations. And luckily, what happened was when I originally got to know where he was, I went straight on the internet looking at flights and looking at this and looking at that, and the flights were £2,500, just normal flights. So I gone, God, I would pay it. Don't get me wrong, I would have paid whatever it was to get him back. But when we had I done a GoFund page, and we got $2,500. By the time I took it, it was $2,500. So I gave them the $2,000. I was going to give them the whole $2,500, but the vet charged us $480, which is the only person that took any money. The rest done it all for free. My flights were for free. My hotels were for free. My food and drink was for free. You know, British Airways flew with first class, and the son actually flew a photographer from Los Angeles, and he was the photographer that outed George Michael in the toilet scene in New York. And he's flew in to do a pigeon, and he thought it was great. You know, we're sitting, we're having a drink and all that, and a bit chat, and he goes, to me, this is fabulous. He says, normally I'm doing murders, or I'm doing rapes, or I'm doing all sorts. And he says, here I'm covering a pigeon. He couldn't believe it. And it was just a brilliant story, as I say, down there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a feel-good factor story when so much in the world is going wrong, and you know, people are downhearted. I mean, you know, we'll go through a pandemic, you know, the cost of living crisis, Brexit, as he already mentioned, and you know, people really are just sick of their lives, and a feel-good factor story like this is fantastic. What was it like to travel over there and be reunited with our friend Bob?
Well, it was really surreal. It actually started. What happened was, I actually went down to Ryan, who was the Sun newspaper's reporter. I went down the night before and stayed Leeds Bradford, and we flew from Leeds Bradford down to London, then from London to New Orleans. Well, when I got to the airport in London, Val, who's from IAG Cargo, they'd actually done a proper box. I don't know if you've got it on your photographs there. The thought I went into that box was unbelievable. It was a proper box with water in and everything, probably transporting back from New Orleans. So once we got over there, as you say, they couldn't wait if we're getting down. But obviously it was a lot of travelling, but it was worth every minute. And when we got there, we actually went to the vet, because the vet had to look after him for 10 days with quarantine and what have you. So that's where we had to pay. The vet got paid for like the quarantine and treating him and all this and things like that. And when I walked in, got out of the car and walked in, it was just, a grown man doesn't like admit he could have cried, but I think you wouldn't believe it, but you felt it quite emotional. And the girl who'd been looking after him, she just burst into tears. She just thought, this is such a great thing. We've been looking after this bird every day. First thing we do, how's Bob? And then when I got him and took him out of the vets, they were just ecstatic, really, that a little bird like that was going to be back to England where he belongs. And then we drove from there down to the Monroeville County Animal Shelter to thank them for what they did. And then when we were there, we asked where the man was who found him. And they said it's only 2 miles away. And we jumped in the car after we'd thanked them and give them the money for doing what they'd done. And we went to see the old fella whose photo's also online if anybody wants to have a look. And he was a preacher, an 89-year-old preacher. And he built a local church himself, so he's quite a religious guy. And when he started telling me the story, he says, I was just sitting there, and he says, and he just goes into the garden, and he says, his bird dropped at my feet, literally dropped at his feet. And he looked at it, and he knew it was like distressed a bit. So he gave it some corn and gave it some wheat, whatever it was, some feed, maybe a bit of wheat or something, and some water. And his wife, who was 85 and could hardly walk, she said to him that day, she said, well, we'll not see that bird again because he's been fed, he's been watered, he'll be away. So next morning he comes out at 6 o'clock in the morning, out of his back garden, and he literally had just got outside and Bob flew to his feet again, literally flew to his feet. And he followed him into the house, and obviously they fed and watered him again, and then they said, we're going to have to get in touch with the local animal shelter. And the animal shelter come down and caught him, and the rest is history, as I say.
Amazing stuff. It's an amazing story. So that really, you thought, I guess, would have been the end of it, but the story really has caught the public's imagination, and it's led to this book, The Adventures of Bob the Pigeon and Mr. Todd, as I mentioned at the top of the show. How did this come about?
Well, basically all the media interviews that took place when I came back, obviously you want some like big high profile shows like BBC Breakfast This Morning and places like that, and they were all saying there's a book in this, or there's a TV show, or there's different things like that. So really it was the media that planted the seed in my head, and I thought, no, obviously I'm not into all that, I didn't know what I was doing. So I had 1 or 2 people contact us about if I'd be interested in doing a book, and I was a bit wary with not knowing them. So anyway, what happened was I went on holiday to Tenerife in September, and Tony, who wrote it, ended up writing the book and doing all the illustrations. He said to us, I've got some ideas about a book. Are you interested? I says, yeah. And we went for a drink. We had a few ideas, and then the next day, I'll tell you a couple of days later, he sent us these illustrations, which some of them are in the book. And I just thought I was blown away with how good they were, because Tony is a hell of an artist. He's done drawings of me 2 grandchildren. I've got them on the wall in the house. So he is a fantastic artist in his own right, as well as being an entertainer. So obviously that was September. Gets back home in October, and we're just firing emails, WhatsApps, messengers between the two of us. Anyway, I went back to Tenerife in November, the wife, and he was buzzing, absolutely buzzing, and we went to meet. We had a cup of coffee and a couple of cups of coffee this afternoon in a bar, and he brought down this like an artist's portfolio of drawings and things, and they were just blown away. And then he says, what do you reckon? I says, got a gun for it. We've got to have a go. And then he says, well, I'm pleased you said that, because I've actually been writing the book. He'd actually been writing the book before we even said we're really going to do it. That's how confident he was. He was more confident than me that it would go. I was trying to keep the lid on it. I wasn't trying to get too. But Tony, from day one, he just thought, he says, this is going to go. He says, it's different. It's true. That's what I think stands out in the when They say I've just been down to Waterstones there, and he said it's a true story. You've got a hell of a chance to see if people like it, which it's been in the domain, so people know the story, and I think that's what's going to stand in its thing. So anyway, getting back to when Tony finished the book, he sent it over for us to have a look at. And by then, I'd phoned up this UK publishing, Willie Bay. I tried to keep it as local as possible, as you can see by some of the drones and that in the book. You've got the Gray's Monument in, you've got the Angel of the North, you've got the Tyne Bridge. So we've tried to keep it local. And once we'd actually got the book ready, he sent it over to us to have a look at. And I just couldn't believe how rhyming it was, how good it was. It just flowed, and it brought the whole story back to me as if it was just yesterday, and it was obviously 4 months earlier. So we got it ready. He got it proofread by a friend of his who was an English teacher, and then we were ready to send it to the publisher. And when we sent it to the publisher, which I think it was 3 or 4 days before Christmas, they said it would be 6 to 8 weeks to get it ready to publish. And right on it, it's come out on the 20th of February, and it's just gone beyond my wildest dreams, of the truth now.
Amazing stuff. It's an amazing story, as I've said, and I guess when a book like this comes out, if it's successful, there could be a film in the offing with this. Who's going to play in the film? Who's going to play in the film?
You fancy it, Steve? You fancy making a film? But believe it or not, when we're in the car driving down from New Orleans to pick the bird up at the vets, see, there was me, there was Val, and there was Ryan in the car. Ryan was doing the driving. And we're joking aside, we're going, hey, who's going to play when the film? And this was back then, before we'd even picked the bird up. We're saying, who's going to play when the film? We've been seeing Ryan, he's a big lad. Yeah, he's about 6'4", 5", and nearly as wide. And when we're in New Orleans and taking a few photographs, you just didn't realise how big he was till he was standing beside you. And I says, I think you'll have to get the Rock to play you, like. And Val, says, we're going to get you, Gwyneth Paltrow to play you, Val. I says, I think I'll get Brad Pitt to play me. It was all just this was just like laughing between ourselves. But I don't know. I think, you hope things like this do develop into like short films and kiddies films and things. Like so Peppa Pig started off like this. You just don't know where it's going to go.
It's an amazing story, mate, and honestly, thanks for sharing it with us. So when he came back from his journey, how did Bob settle back in? I mean, obviously he can't speak, as you've already said, but was it water off a duck's back, and were you a bit more concerned about where he was going to end up next?
Well, obviously he's never been out again. He's never been out the loft since because he actually bumped his wing. I think he's got something on his wing, so he couldn't fly even if I wanted to. But I just put him back with his hen, and I let him bring a couple of young birds up, a couple of youngsters, to settle him back in. And actually, that youngster wasn't born till probably end of August, beginning of September. And she's actually in the stock loft now, sitting 2 eggs. That's how mature she is, which you never normally get them that young. Normally they'll not lay eggs at that age, but she's actually sitting 2 eggs. So now he obviously took him a while. Make sure the first time he had a bath, I put the bath in for him to come in, and he honestly, if you'd seen him, he'd come off the bath and he was like a drowned rat because all his condition had gone. His feathers were just all matted and everything. And after about 3 or 4 baths, he started looking a bit like a pigeon, and he molted all his old feathers out. And as I say, if anybody wants to have a look at the condition he's in now, just go onto I gone onto the local news, and then you'll see he's actually in the pink. He's in beautiful condition, as if nothing had happened to him. You wouldn't think he'd gone what he'd gone through, because he's just like a normal pigeon in the loft, and he's such a quiet pigeon. Some pigeons are quite boisterous, but he just sits there.
Did he break any records with the distance that he flew then?
I think he broke the record for getting someone back from America. I think pigeons have gotten lost before, but I don't think anybody's probably done what we've done. And it was a team game, really. A team game right from Sarah Osborne, who works for a company called Emporio. She paid me hotels for us. The Sun newspaper were absolutely fantastic because they paid for all my meals, my drinks, and incidentals. In British Airways, they give 3 of were first class, and to fly us back first class, and all the logistics of getting him in a cargo and getting them through all the tests and everything. God knows how much it would have cost to do it, and all of them companies done it for free. So you kind of get better than that. Like, people call newspapers, but after what the Sun newspaper done for me, it was brilliant.
Yeah, and obviously, there's going to be money made from the book. Are you going to treat Bob?
I'm a what? Sorry?
Are you going to treat Bob?
Treat?
I don't is he going to get some extra seed?
Oh, I don't think you can get tread any better. My wife says they get tread better than her now. So, so I don't think you couldn't treat them any better. To me, he's special to me, but he's just a pigeon who's a bit special. You treat them all the same. You do have your favourites, especially because he was a good pigeon. He won 2 big races from France, and that's how he got his name Bob. Because the lad who bred him was called Bob Donaldson, and when he won the big races, I actually rang him up and said to Bob, "I'm calling the pigeon after you," and he was over the moon. Unfortunately, he died about 18 months ago of cancer, but he was tickled pink that I'd called it Bob, and who knew later that obviously it's caught on, isn't it? Everybody, Bob the Builder. Everybody talks about Bob the Builder. Everybody mentions Bob the Pigeon, but you just don't know how far it'll go. You hope it'll. Obviously, you're more involved in this type of thing than what I am, so you've probably been more involved. So you will know what can and can't be done.
It's a great story. I think the only comparison I've got in my life is my dog that I had when I was a youngster called Nipper. I had a little Staffy, and he invaded the pitch at a game and scored a goal. And I went on a similar journey like with you. I think that was back in 95, 96. And there were the Sun newspapers, cartoonists drew a picture of him in the Manchester United dressing room. He was front page. He was on the breakfast program, the Big Breakfast, doing interviews. It was one of those feel-good factor stories. So, and again, it was an animal. People, in this country love a good animal story. So it is no surprise to see.
When you look at how the media have responded to it, big name media, as I say, you're involved with it a lot more than what I am, but, you're talking about BBC Breakfast, like Naga and people like that, and like Vernon Kay and Josie Wilson, you've had like dealing with them. It's just surreal, really, talking to people like that. And you're thinking, it's just, it's lovely to see. I just, like Zoe Ball, I got a phone call of Zoe Ball, and I was on Zoe Ball twice. She loved it. And then we were sitting in a bar in Manchester in January going to Barbados, and I got a text, and it was of Zoe Ball's producer, asking how the bird was and what's happening. And I told her, she says, I'm in the book. She says, oh, we'll have you on, but unfortunately Zoe's on holiday, and the girl who texted us is on holiday as well. So I'm assuming next week Zoe Ball will probably be on radio too, I would think.
Fantastic, mate. Well, listen, it's a real feel-good factor story. I'm delighted that you've got the book out. The Adventures of Bob the Pigeon and Mr. Todd, written and illustrated by Tony Race, based on the true story by Alan Todd. Where can people get that, mate?
It's online on Amazon, but I've just been in a meeting with Waterstones, and Waterstones are going to stock it. So if you want to go into the local Waterstones, you can pre-order it, and they've just ordered some today, so they'll be getting them in, because people have been in Waterstones shops already asking for the book, and obviously they haven't got the book yet. But anybody local to me, I live in Bladen, I've got a book signing at a cricket club next Wednesday, a Swallow Cricket Club.
Yeah.
Anybody who wants to come down, hopefully I'll have my supply of books through by then. And people can come and meet Bob and have the photograph took with them, bring the kids. At the end of the day, this is about the kids, really, trying to get the kids interested. if they want to come and have a photograph with Bob, they're more than welcome.
And what time's that at Swalwell Cricket Club?
5:30.
And it's
You're more than
next.
welcome if you want to come, Steve.
And what day is it, sorry?
Next Wednesday.
Next
5:30 onwards, next Thursday night. Next Wednesday night, sorry. Next Wednesday, 1st of March.
Brilliant stuff. 1st of March, Swalwell Cricket Club, 5:30.
It's online on Amazon or through Waterstone. Any major book, I think all the major books, I don't know how many books people there is out there, but according to the Waterstones, they reckons all the books shops will have it in. Because people in the States, it's in the domain, it's out there, it's popular, and the publicity that it's had already should get it off to the, should get it out there.
Great stuff, mate. It's honestly lovely to speak to you, Alan. Great to get you on. Best of luck with the book. Let's hope that there is a film to be, forthcoming from this, because it's a real feel-good factor story, typical British feel-good factor story. But best of luck with the book, and best of luck with your launch officially of the book next week, mate. And good luck with all the ventures, mate. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you very much, Steve. Keep in touch.
Take care, Alan. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
A big thanks to all our sponsors, starting with Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website skipsandbins.com, easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. You can order them from mrvickys.co.uk, email them at info@mrvickys.co.uk, or call them on 01768 210 102. Why not try some new beers at Blowhole Brewery? You can find them at blowholebrewery.co.uk. Thanks also to United Group Travel, UK Coach Holidays based in Morpeth. Telephone 01670 362 460 or mobile 07957 141 654. Graham, your driver, Beverly answering your calls and looking after you on your tour. Thanks also to 3 Properties. They specialise in sourcing investment properties for their clients who are looking to invest in the Northeast. They offer a full in-house service from sourcing the deals to managing the properties for you. They've done over 100 plus deals in the last 12 months for clients all over the UK. Give the guys a follow on Instagram, matty.patter_northeast property and phil.reed_northeast property, or email phil@3property.co.uk if you're interested in getting a good property deal. Thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle, and the guys who run our website, NUFCmatters.com. Thanks to Media Arts for all the videos. If you want to subscribe to the channel, hit the subscribe button underneath this video today. Hit the thumb up to like the video and click share to your social media. If you're out and about, you can catch us as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and the rest. If you want to join the channel, click join and you'll find out our membership packages down there. Very easy to do. Or if you want to become a cult member, £25 a month, go to nufcmatters.com and look for membership pack, or put your smartphone over the QR code and it will take you straight there. Anyone who subscribes to the channel will get a free car sticker. To get your car sticker, simply email john@nufcmatters.com. Got a few events coming up over the next few weeks. Steve Howie, Friday the 24th of February at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets available for £29 on voucher. And even with Nobby Solano, Saturday the 25th of March, tickets £15. Book at nufcmatters.com. Nobby Solano is also at Felling Cricket Club on Good Friday the 7th of April at 4 o'clock. Tickets are £10 and available behind the bar. And an evening with Frank Clark and John Gibson, Thursday the 20th of April, that's at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets are £15. Book now at nufcmatters.com. We've also got a vast array of t-shirts available at the website. If you want your special Wembley t-shirt, you can go to nufcmatters.com and get one now while stocks last.